But I am worried. I am worried that this is going to be catastrophic for some families.
How much can you set aside that will actually make a meaningful difference?
It's surprising over the period of 18 years, if you do start from birth, how much that can build. One controversial thing, if I had enough money, I would.
Welcome to Investing Unlocked with me, Georgie Frost.
And me, Rick Kelsey. Hello.
We're joined today by one of the UK's leading voices on personal finance, FT consumer editor, money expert on Lorraine, and author of the best-selling book, What They Don't Teach You About Money, Claer Barrett. Welcome, Claer.
Thanks for having me.
Today, we're focusing on investing for kids. There's been so much talk recently about student loans, but that isn't the only financial hurdle that young people face. And one of the best ways to give kids a financial leg up is to start investing for them, and the earlier the better. But how do you go about doing it? And what lessons can you teach kids so they don't blow it all when they eventually get their hands on it? Rick, two young kids, a boy, a girl.
Yeah.
Are you investing for them? I think I know the answer to this one, but
I feel like as a financial journalist, I kind of had to get this one right. But what I wanted to do was bring other people in from the start as well.
Okay.
So there wasn't this kind of this mismatch of different people putting into different funds or different savings accounts. So I just thought, let's keep this simple. They're each getting a junior ISA, and they both got it when they started out. And if anybody
when
else
they started out
on
their journey of life
at zero,
yeah.
And if anyone says to me, "Can I give Elizabeth or Albie £15 for their birthday?" I'll say, pop it in the ISA. So it's all going in the same pot.
Can I ask how much you put in every month?
Yeah, of course. So I put in £25 and then the grandma puts in £15 and then any birthday money also goes in.
Now, Claer, I remember back in the day, my little Abbey National savings book. I never knew what happened to that money. I probably did just blow it whenever I got my hands on it. But what are the benefits of investing for kids over just saving?
Okay, so the big thing to get your head around is inflation. Now, the way that junior ISAs work, you can pay money in, but the child can't get any money out until they're 18 and the account legally transfers to them. It actually turns into an adult ISA and continues. But at that point, that's the danger zone because they can, if they want to,
blow it,
take the money out. And that's why a lot of parents think, oh, I'm not sure about junior ISAs. And the lockup as well. You know, if you're putting all of the money for your children in a junior ISA and then you actually need it because at the age of 10, say, they decide that they want to play a musical instrument, you can't access it. You've got to wait until they're 18. So there's definitely a balance to be struck between what do you want that money to do. But if it's money for when they do come of age, when they're 18 or a young adult, with all of the pressures that young adults are facing in terms of student debts, the jobs market, AI, the future, student loans, the list is very long. If they can come into some money, they're going to have a much better chance of your money making more money if it is invested in the stock market over a long period of time compared to putting it in the best paying cash account, because the technical term for the interest rates available on cash junior ISAs is crap.
Yeah.
Basically, it's really awful. I had a look on the Money Facts website on the way here. And of 30 accounts that they listed, amusingly, not one of them was classified as easy to open.
Oh, right.
The building societies, the regional building societies, are the ones that pay the best rates on cash. But you generally need to open an account in branch or by post. You can't do it online. And even if you did do that, the best rate of interest you're going to get is not much more than 3%. So that's, about par with inflation at the moment, although inflation's going up, not much better than the Bank of England base rate. But if you were, for example, to put your money in an investment ISA, you'd have a much better chance of beating that over multiple years, you would hope. But of course, some years it's going to go up, some years it's going to go down. There's a risk. And I think that's what puts a lot of parents off.
I do want to dig into more detail about the different ways that you can invest and a little bit more about the junior ISA and how it really works. But I just want to get to that, how much you have to set aside, because it is very difficult at the moment. There are costs for everybody. It's not just young people that are facing costs at the moment. Everybody is. And you're thinking about paying the bills for today. You want to save, like you said, because if you do need that money to be accessible, you would like to save a little pot. So then how much can you set aside that will actually make a meaningful difference?
Well, I mean, I think the key is consistency. Doing a small amount, if you can, every month, just like you're doing. And it's surprising over the period of 18 years, if you do start from birth, how much that can build. I mean, to give you an example, if you were to do a bit more than you're doing, £150 a month from birth, assuming annual growth after fees of 5% a year, your kid could have £50,000 by the time they turn 18. Now, if you did a bit more, £300 a month, double that. They could have a six-figure sum, £100,000. Now, the other thing that you're doing, lots of people do, is they get the grandparents to help out. And I think that is the smart thing, because the older generations, generally speaking, they've got money that they want to pass on. Everyone's very worried about inheritance tax.
Yeah.
And structuring a regular payment into a grandchild or a niece or a nephew's junior ISA, because you're making a regular payment, if you can afford to do that from your surplus income, this is a term that HMRC use, a gift from your surplus income that's regular, won't fall, in most cases, into the inheritance tax problem. You don't need to survive for 7 years for that gift to be given tax-free. So for families who do have, in the older generations, money to pass down, the junior ISA is a fantastic tax planning tool. But even for families who don't have lots of intergenerational money to pass down, just combining between different relatives to get to £50, £100, £150 a month, if you can afford it, is a fantastic way of getting some money for them when they're going to really need it as a teen.
I want to go on this point because you've both mentioned about grandparents paying into junior ISAs. I'm a fun auntie. I don't have kids. When we think about the ways in which you can save for grandkids or relatives, children who are relatives that aren't yours, people talk about premium bonds. That's the kind of most famous, granny's favourite, as it were. Lots of people won't realise that actually there are other ways that you can gift to the kids.
And premium bonds also another inflation disaster. Now, I have got a premium bond that I think my dad probably bought for me when I was a baby in the 1970s, showing my age. And when it was purchased, it cost £2. What's that premium bond worth now?
Oh, don't tell me it's £2.
Yeah, £2. Now, £2 in the late 70s, could have bought you probably
a lot of premium
bonds.
bonds.
A massive night out. Let's face it.
Absolutely.
But, £2 today, so like premium bonds, if you're going to keep money in them for any length of time, you're not going to be protected from inflation. And while investing isn't a guarantee of beating inflation, you'll have a lot more chance of doing so. But the fact is, the parents have got to be the ones to organise it, because only a parent or a guardian can open the junior ISA. And depending on the platform you're with, some platforms will let other people pay in. But like I'm a fun auntie as well, and I fund my niece and nephew's junior ISAs every month, but I have to pay the money to my brother. He then has the direct debit coming out. So there has to be a degree of trust and organisation.
So we individually allowed 20 grand, kids 9, it's separate to us, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So every child has got an ISA allowance, £9,000 a year. So this is from the ages of 0 to 18. When I set them up for my step-grandchildren who were 0 at the time, I have to say it's pretty amazing. You think there's a tax record for you and you're still in nappies. But yeah, so you can pay up to £9,000 a year per child until they're 18, at which point it turns into an adult stocks and shares ISA, either a cash or a stocks and shares one, depending on what they have. And it is possible to hold both a cash ISA and a stocks and shares ISA for a child, but you can only have one each of each sort of account in your child's name. Then just to recap on why ISAs are brilliant. So you pay the money in.
Yep.
You don't have to pay capital gains tax on the investment growth. So your investments grow in value, you would hope, after 18 years. if you wanted to take all of that money out and spend it, you wouldn't have to pay capital gains tax on selling the shares. You wouldn't have to pay dividend tax if you received any income from, like, say you've got a share like BP or Barclays Bank in there if you've done shares. You won't have to pay dividend tax on the income from those. And there won't be an income tax problem for your child. Like if they take out £100,000 when they get to 18, they won't have to declare that on a tax return and end up losing it back to HMRC. It's protected from tax in those three ways, and the same goes for adult ISAs. But I would love it if Savvy the Squirrel, the government's little character that it's got promoting investment ISAs for adults, had a baby. Now I looked up on Google, right? A baby squirrel is called a kit. Fact of the day. I never knew that. So let's have Savvy have a kit, and then we can educate more people who are leaving cash to be eaten by inflation. All the squirrel's nuts being eaten by some inflationary monster. Let's have Savvy the Squirrel's kit extol the virtues of investing for young children who can afford to take a much greater risk if their money is going to be locked up for the best part of 2 decades.
And actually, because inflation's been what it has been over the past 10 years, even if you had the top junior cash ISA, your money would still be worth less than it was 10 years ago because inflation would have eroded away the gains.
Claire, what do you think the reason for that is? Adults, kids, whatever. I don't think kids are really thinking about inflation right now, but adults certainly will be the ones in control of it. Is it a trust thing? Is it a safety thing? Do we just feel a bit happier that we've got cash and it's just feels safer?
I think that parents are worried that if they take a risk with their child's money and they lose money, that's taking candy away from the baby.
Well, especially if you've been given it by a grandparent or something. That's a lot of responsibility.
Especially if that money has been gifted. And if they're not doing investing in their own right, then will they then start investing for a child? This is another problem. If they're used to cash, as most of the adult ISAs are showing us, people appreciate the safety of cash and they think that is a less risky route, but actually the risks of inflation eating your money over 18 years are much higher, but it's not immediately obvious in the way that ISA providers are allowed under the current regulations to market these products.
Now, you've both spoken about the fact that at 18, that money becomes your child's money. And we'll get on to how to teach your child about money in a little bit. But one of the options, therefore, and I know certainly a lot of my friends do this instead, is they save within their own ISA for their kids. Now, obviously, there's a sort of temptation issue there. You've got to ring fence that money off. But that is always an option, isn't it?
Yeah, particularly the number of women, especially who I know, who are saving into a junior ISA for their child. And I say, well, have you got an ISA for yourself, investment ISA? Oh, I'm prioritising them. And you think, okay, that's great. But the example I gave earlier about the musical instrument, I say this as somebody whose parents were forced to buy her incredibly expensive musical instrument at the age of 12. If you had the money in your own stocks and shares ISA and you've got the allowance, £20,000 a year, most people can't afford to pay that much in. So if you've got the headroom, put it in there and then you can access it. And that might be a better route for you if, for example, maybe you haven't started on the day that they were born. Let's face it.
Not like Rick.
There's a lot of things that are going on.
Well done, love.
I was literally filling the form in. I was like, boy or girl?
Exactly. You may be a bit distracted as a young parent, but say you're starting when your child is like 15 or 16 and thinking, oh, they need this money for when they're going to university, then you might think, actually,
I'm just now thinking where that Abbey National money went when I got hold of it. But talking about locked-in money, something that I'm reading a lot more, pension for kids.
Oh, gosh.
Pensions for kids, right.
I mean, wind me up.
Get my head around that one.
Oh, why? So you can pay, you can put £3,600 a year into a pension for kids, about $2,800 yourself, and the rest would be a top-up from the government. Now, why would you want to, and I'd love to hear Claire's view on this, but why would you want to do it? Well, there's enormous tax benefits to you and your child. You get that automatic top up every year. And you are building a nest egg that could literally be worth more than £1 million by putting that money until they're 18 and then just letting it sit there and let it build over all those years until they're about 60 or whatever the year that you'll be able to access it at that point. But why would you do that? I honestly think it's actually a bit of a mad thing to do.
Well, if you have lots of money and you don't want to pay tax on that money,
no, because I think you've got to go
no?
You'd have to be so far down the line in order to make it actually valuable to do, because you'd want to use your junior ISA first before you got to pensions for kids, because what you're doing is planning for so far down the line that you don't know what the rules would be, the tax year rules in 60 years' time. Now. And also, you're blocking access to that for 60 years when you could have access to it when they're 18 years old with a junior ISA. So people place the argument that you could have this pot of money for £1 million when they're 60. But actually, you could have the same pot through an ISA, but actually have the option to access it from 18, which is why it's when you've done everything else for your children, then you hit the pension for kids. I was going to say,
so that's the argument then, isn't it? When you've maxed out your 20 grand, you've maxed out your 9, then you can start looking at is that the only reason that you would ever consider doing that?
No, I think a lot of parents are scared of the access issue at 18 for junior ISAs. And certainly I think of myself when I was 18. I'm so sad, Georgie, that we didn't know each other when we were both 18-year-olds. So I can understand why parents might think, okay, we'll put it in a pension and then they can't touch it. But as you say, there's going to be so many points at which they'll need that money throughout their life, as young adults. It almost feels mean. One controversial thing, if I had enough money, I would pay into a junior SIP, as they are known, self-invested personal pension, for my niece and for my female grandchild, even if I wasn't doing the full whack every year, just to give them a little bit extra to be compounding away in the hope that it would fill the gender pension gap that they will invariably fall victim to in their future life. But that's the only way that I personally would consider it, because I think with the junior ISA access at 18 problem, I'm banking on the fact that I can not only educate my young charges about the benefits of investing, but I can also make them feel ownership of that money and feel like it is truly theirs. The little ones who are 3.5, they don't know about their junior ISAs yet. They barely understand what money is, seeing it's now become invisible. They see cards being tapped. They don't even have piggy banks. This is the modern world. But my nephews who are 10, they know that Auntie Claire and Daddy have started this investment fund for them, and they have seen that after all of my 50 quid a month's going in for the best part of 10 years, that they now have £10,000 each, which did cause a bit of consternation when they told their friends the playground. But they know that they will get that money when they're 18, and they are beginning to understand that it's invested in the stock market. And the next phase is going to be that we'll let them buy a share in something that I hope will teach them two things. One, that investing in individual shares is a bit of a fool's errand. But number two, that you can do it, and that this is what companies are about, just to sort of broaden their experience of life, the universe, and everything, how the corporate world works. Because there are so many brands that they come into contact with on a daily basis that they could buy a share in on a modern investment platform, from like Amazon, Disney, like even Greg's, the restaurant group which owns Wagamama. So I just think, let them buy a share. It will increase their sense of curiosity about how the world works. And then if they do lose money on it, or the company does do a profit warning, then everything that happens can be a lesson.
Doesn't this come down to purpose, though? What is the purpose on why we are investing? Why are we giving to our nieces and nephews? Why are we giving to our kids? Because I imagine for a lot of people, our purpose with investing is to help our children at key points in their lives. One of those key points would be going to university, to be able to help them out. We know the problems in the university system at the moment. Another one of those key points might be buying a car or getting on the property market for the first time.
Or starting their own business.
Starting their own business. The real key pinch points, and also points when families really struggle, when you go down to one income, when you have a child in your late 30s, maybe early 40s, some of those really difficult points in life where you just think, I wish I had a little bit of extra money. So that's one of the purposes that I think you need to think about why you're investing for your kids. And that's why I think a self-invested personal pension for a child is so far down the list that you should avoid it until you've filled everything else.
Before we carry on, a quick word from our sponsor, PensionBee. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you care a fair bit about investing and making the most of your money. But here's the thing, you don't have to be a pensioner to care about your pension. In fact, the earlier you pay attention, the more powerful it can be. Your pension is likely to be one of, if not the biggest investments you have, yet it's often the one people ignore the longest. That's where PensionBee comes in. They're a leading online pension provider focused on helping people build confidence and take real control of their retirement savings at any stage of life. Their app and website make it easy to combine old pension pots, manage contributions flexibly, and see exactly what's happening with your money all in one place. You can also access your pension from age 55, rising to 57 from 2028. If you want to take a more active role in your pension investing, download the PensionBee app or visit their website to get started. Remember, when investing, your capital is at risk. What are the biggest mistakes, Claire, that you think or that you see people make when investing for kids?
Well, I think Simon mentioned on a previous show, putting money in an account, but then not investing it. That's definitely something that happens. I mean, I think, just putting a junior ISA for a very young child in cash, full stop, and not understanding the relative benefits of investing over a long period of time. But, that could help you as well to understand that if you're also somebody who doesn't invest in your own life. Not knowing that you can get started for really quite small sums of money, both as an adult and a junior ISA investor. You can normally start an account with £50 to £100. Most of the providers will let you set up a regular investment for £25 a month, even less with some providers, thinking that you've got to be an investment expert to open an investment ISA. You don't. You can pick a kind of strawberry vanilla chocolate type investment fund option. And I would say err on the opposite side of caution for a young investor who can't touch their pot for 18 years. You can afford to be more adventurous, take more equity exposure. You've got a long time to make that money back if markets are volatile. And the final point is, if you really can't afford to save very much into your own ISA, then, look at how you could put your children's JISA savings potentially into your own ISAs, just so you have the option of flexibility. So if you need that money to get them something before they turn 18, ultimately the money is for the child, and having more access to it, but having the money invested, that could be a good way of doing it.
We've all spoken about what happens at Christmas. Now, I'm not expecting a massive lump sum at Christmas, but you're certainly going to get a few quid more, aren't you? Is it better to sort of drip feed, lump sum, hands-on?
I'm glad you asked this question, because I think at the moment, with everything that's going on in the world, it's quite scary to invest a lump sum. And, to some people, £100 is a lot of money to invest all in one go. So I've always favoured, personally, as a scaredy cat investor, and I hold my hands up and I say I am a scaredy cat investor, because I think most people are.
But do you invest?
Oh, yes.
So there we go. You can still be scared, but still face the fear and do it anyway.
I've managed to get over my hump of like, I'm going to lose all of my money.
Give us some tips.
If I can put in £250 a month, which for a long time, like in my 40s, that's what I was doing. So like a significant amount, but not like millions of pounds, you know what I mean? So I think if I can do £250 a month, like realistically, in the course of a month, I could probably quite easily spend £250 on clothes, nights out, Ubers. I have a terrible Uber problem because I'm always late. If I'm spending it on those things, the money's gone. I don't then think, I've only got £50. So it's just like getting over the sort of psychological attachment to the money and thinking, okay, I'm not going to spend it on those things. I am going to put it aside on payday. And if the money goes down, it's better than the money not being in there at all, which is what would happen if it was just spent. So psychological problem number one solved. And then because you are paying it in every month rather than having, say I paid in £10,000 on the 1st of January, every time I look at that blooming app, I'm going to be thinking it's 9,981 now, I've made a mistake. Or, whereas if you're doing £250 a month, you can't really tell. It will say somewhere on the app, you've paid in over the years £4,000 and now you've got £7,000 and you can be like, woohoo!
It'll give you your growth figure.
Exactly. But you won't be attached to some kind of like big number in your head and then be panicked into trying to take the money out or trying to time the markets or thinking the world is going to hell in a handcart, I better cash in, and then see the stock market soar up the next day, because generally after things go down very sharply, they tend to correct again. So if you can think, I can leave that money in there, it's stuff that I'm building up. I'm not intending to take it out until my age starts with a 6.
It's so true. Automation and pound cost averaging, exactly what Claire's doing. So it just helps out.
The day after you get paid, pay yourself or your kid first, automate it, and just don't look at it that often, especially during scary times.
Yeah, and I also feel happy when I see the money going out, well, to my brother's account and then into their junior ISAs. I do check from time to time and say, Steve, should we look at their ISA balances? But I feel happy when I see it, because I think, okay, that £50 now, that could be worth £300, £400, £500 to them in the future by the time they spend it. Because I would hope, like your kids, that they would keep the adult stocks and shares ISA, that they wouldn't take it all out at 18. I have said to them, like, if you want to take some out at 18 because you want to, like, do a trip or do something, that's up to you. You could spend some then, you could save some for something else, you could use it for different things. We've talked about starting your own business because they've seen that, I've got business interests, Dad's got business interests. So it's sort of just opening their little minds to the possibilities of what money could do for them.
It's really good. So my nephew from a very young age was like, we don't have any money. We don't have any money. I've got no money. I was like, but you don't need money. You're 5. But he's always had this kind of interest in money. And so I have had a discussion with him. I said, look, when I die, you'll have all my money, so you'll be fine. But actually, it's an interesting conversation and dynamic we have. We're very close. But,
that took it to a different conversation.
Yeah, but actually, a lot of people probably do think, but when I'll leave something in, I've written my will, of course, I'll just leave something for it. But actually, wouldn't it be more helpful that if I had that spare cash, that I could just actually invest for him, because we'd lose a big chunk of that potentially to inheritance tax. Whereas actually, if I gave it 50 quid now, it could grow. So it just sort of flips it around, and maybe I need to have a different conversation with my nephew. A bit more cheerier one, I think.
Oh yeah, or you might be like slipping something in your tea.
Don't even know. We've got no money. Auntie Georgie said that she will leave me some money. No.
Yeah.
But look, we've talked about what will happen when kids, young adults, will get hold of this money. And that leads us naturally on. And Claire, you've mentioned a lot of lessons, really lovely little tidbits. I want to get more into that. You talk a lot about the lessons that we learn aren't actually the ones, you sit down and really, it's the things that you hear. And the lessons I learn, or the things that have influenced my behavior the most, are definitely not my parents sitting down and telling me, you should invest in this stock and, save this money and do this is investing. Not at all. It was the arguments. It was the hushed tones. It was there were difficult times growing up, and my parents did the best they could. But of course, money is stressful. And I just think it's really important that we kind of understand that the way that we speak around kids, not just to kids, is informing what they're learning about money.
And that they don't associate it with stress, because, my goodness, like at the moment, we're going to go into a cost of living crisis again. At the moment, we have no idea how bad it's going to get. I am a naturally optimistic person, but I am worried. I am worried that this is going to be catastrophic for some families. What they're saying about food price inflation, energy price inflation, these are costs that no household can avoid. So it's going to be those who have the least money.
Had so many.
Already had so much. Those with the least of the money are going to be absolutely pulverised by. So when children are hearing money being spoken about in negative context, when they are seeing their family members arguing over money, that can be some of, as you say, we do try and hide our money problems from children because we don't want them to be stressed out by this. But when it spills over into what they do absorb and what they do here are the stressful points, how I think we try and get around that is just by normalising talking about money in the household when it's not a source of stress, when it's just a source of everyday life. And like, how can we involve them in helping us to run the household finances? You know, if they want a mobile phone, for example, because my brother's boys are 10, so it's not going to be long. You know, what research can they do online to find out the best contract, the best SIM card, the cheapest way of buying a phone? I know lots of children who are selling stuff know, in their parents' names on Vinted, and who are buying clothes on Vinted as well, which I think is fantastic because they're getting an idea of value. Okay, so if I go into a shop and buy this brand name jumper brand new, £100, but if I buy it secondhand for a tenner, but like, where's that £90 gone? Who's absorbed that loss and who's benefited from buying that thing cheaper? So I think there are lots of things that you can still do to teach your children about money in a way that they're saving money and not spending too much of it. But it's normalising the conversations so that it's not just a one message of money equals stress equals bad things.
I was in a shopping centre the other day, and it just kind of hit home looking at a kid, the dynamic between two kids and a mother, and it's the pressure. And you must feel this, you know, the kids. Oh, but why can't I have this? I want this. I'm sure I did this a lot when I was little. That's just so hard. That if you are under stress and, you know, times are tough, you just want to just no, you can't have another toy. You know.
I think we are getting better at it, though. I think we're getting better at talking about money. I mean, certainly my friends now, you know, really try to hammer home the value of things. And because we have to teach our children in a cashless society, that brings its own pressures, because you can't go, oh, well, you've got this much left. So you have to literally talk in numbers. Well, that's £10. So
get your phone out.
if that's going to cost you £5, that means you've got £5 left for the rest of the month. So do you want to spend all that now? So you still have to use basic numbers to explain it, but it is more difficult. I mean, you can get these cashless cards for kids from when they're about 7 or 8. I feel like that's still sometimes a little bit young for them to have access to that kind of stuff, and maybe I'd leave it a couple more years. But actually talking to them about it, I think, is getting a little bit better.
What do you think of the cashless element?
Yeah, so 6 years old, you can get them one of those cards with a lot of these providers. I think that children understand that you're tapping phones now more than cards. They understand that the tapping is the transaction and that's where the money is going, but they're not looking at the price.
Just the tap.
And neither are we sometimes. And they're not understanding the kind of the chain of value, the fact that, you know, I have had to work very hard for a day to earn that money that's going to pay after tax for that thing. You know, that's the sort of part that they don't understand. They might say, oh, well, you've got lots of money in your bank account,
in your phone,
therefore you can afford to buy me another Labubu doll or whatever the craze is. But actually, no, that money is set aside for something else. You know, there's only a certain portion of our money that we spend on wants versus needs. So it's an ongoing conversation. And yes, you know, it is incredibly hard. And you do have to put your foot down on things, even as a fun auntie, because you want them to learn the lessons, but sometimes learning the lesson the hard way, and they spend all of their money and they run out, that in itself is a lesson. I was speaking to a psychologist last week about the junior ISA problem and how parents want to control what the children spend it on because they feel like, well, that's my money that I've invested for you.
At 18.
So at 18, if you then go and spend it all on an issue, you can't do that because that's my money, whereas, of course, legally it is their money. And she said, well, if they do take it all out and spend it on rubbish, that in itself is is a lesson. Maybe they learn that lesson at 18 and then they build their investments back up again and they don't make that mistake. But it is a risk that you take. So trying to educate them as best as you can, trying to make them feel a connection to that money, ownership of that money, seeing that account with their name on year after year. I wouldn't suggest checking it more than sort of every 6 months, because you don't want to develop a trader mentality among your children. But having an opportunity to talk to them at regular intervals about like what's going on in that account, the fact that it's their own money and it's tangible and they can see what's happening with it. So much can flow from that, other than just them getting a lump sum when they're 18.
What's the best way to go about finding a junior ISA?
Well, I mean, periodically in the FT, we'll do a table of what we think the best buy ones are. At the moment, there's a lot of competition between providers. There are a number of providers who, if you have an account with them and then you want to set up a junior ISA account, they will offer reduced fees.
Or even free.
You'll still have to pay the investment fees on the funds that you pick, but you won't have to pay an annual account fee. But I have to say, Georgie, this is one of those areas where AI can be your friend. And, put into your chat engine of choice, please can you compare the fees on X number of different junior ISA accounts? And obviously using comparison websites is helpful, although with the investment ones it can be a bit harder to compare all of the different charges that can be applied than, say, an interest rate, which is just one number, nice and simple. But ask other parents, ask other friends, what have they done? Share the knowledge. And if they say what's a junior ISA, then you can obviously educate them about the benefits of tax-free investing.
I just want to touch on the AI theme, because look, a lot of parents will not feel comfortable having conversations with their children about money, won't feel comfortable talking about money. Money is one of the biggest reasons that people break up. So it's a big area of conflict. One or a couple of new areas, I suppose: social media, which we've discussed in the past, Rick, AI, in where people are going to get their education. And I imagine a lot of young people, particularly social media, but also ChatGPT and Claude and all that sort of, they're getting a lot of their information from there. What's your views about that? Force for good, force for evil, jury's out?
I think it's a force for good. It's a way that they can get information. What were they going to do before this? I often speak to journalists in the FT office and say, I was a journalist before Google. And they're like, oh, wow. How did that work? And I said, we had filing cabinets and better memories. We remember, we had clips of, you won't remember this, I'm looking at you as if you're my age, press cuttings, were kept in a library. There was a different way of doing things. How liberating and wonderful is it that actually AI, social media can democratize a lot of this access, which otherwise would have been, perhaps gate kept by wealthier families. They would have known about junior ISAs. Their children would have known about investing, but would you know about it if your parents or grandparents hadn't done it? Maybe not. I mean, look at all of the statistics about the number of Gen Zs who are investing as a generation compared to millennials and Gen X. There's been a couple of quite serious, large studies, both in the UK and America, that have shown that Gen Zs are really leaning into investing. And I think it's the democratization of access to information that's been the biggest, shot in the arm for that. But of course, the flip side is that the information that they're receiving via these channels about investing may not obviously be correct, may be correct in one geographical jurisdiction like America, but not another. You see a lot of that with like, should I repay my student loans? UK, US system, completely different. So that can be dangerous. But the whole thing with teaching children about finance in schools is accompanied, which is a brilliant thing that's happening, is going to be accompanied by teaching them a lot more about critical thinking. And I think that those two things are kind of, you need both. Yes, look at the internet. Yes, look at AI to find out more about the financial world, but recognise that the confident tone in which the AI tells you to do something may not necessarily be correct. And you still need to kick the tires and actually ask some maybe older human beings in your life about what they think too.
Now, Claire, can you spill the tea? I think is what all of the kids say nowadays on TikTok. Is that right? Spill the tea?
I've heard that phrase.
Okay, good. Didn't make that. Just own it, Georgie.
Own it.
Well, it's a phrase now. Okay, yeah. Apparently, you're writing a new book.
Oh, your sources are not wrong,
Okay.
Madame Georgie. I have to say, yes, I've been very busy. I have been hiding away. You may not have heard me as much on Lorraine or the radio, or indeed in the FT at the weekend. But yes, I am working on something. Follow my social media at Claer B on Instagram and TikTok, and as soon as I can make an official announcement, i.e. when I've written a bit more of it,
You can't give us a hint.
then I will.
Little hint.
Well, it's
Teeny
not
tiny one.
It's not a million miles away from what we've been talking about today.
Okay.
I have to
Interesting.
say, but I hope it fills a gap in people's lives. Because I think, we need to be talking about money more, talking about money on podcasts, talking about money in the queue for the bus stop, talking about money full stop. And it's very much for normal people and not for, the uber rich, how you can do small things that will make a difference, a positive difference over time. So hopefully a message of hope and optimism in quite scary times.
A final point on my reflection, Rick, I'll get your reflections shortly, but is that I'm now really inspired to do something for my niece and nephew. But what's holding me back is having a conversation with my sister and her husband about it. Now, they're wonderful people. They would be enormously grateful. But I don't know. It's a conversation that it makes me feel uncomfortable.
Is that a British thing?
I don't know if it's a British thing, but you'd think as a finance journalist who talks about finance all the time, when it comes to issues in my own life which feel just slightly, would they think that I was being showy, maybe? Is it too intrusive? Would it imply that I think they're not saving enough? All of these thoughts are going on in my head.
I think you should just blame me.
Yeah.
And everybody watching should just blame me and say, I listened to a podcast the other day, and there was this posh-sounding woman from the Financial Times who said, actually, if you start investing into a junior ISA for your kid, they could have a really reasonable sum of money by the time they're 18. Is that something you're doing, and could I contribute to it if you are? And maybe instead of giving them a plastic toy at Christmas or birthday, could I give you some money to put into their account? Because the parents will and guardians will have to be the ones who set it up, and they may already have one.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
And you don't know about it.
I'm sure they do.
And unless they're paying in the full £9,000 per year per child,
I'm
which,
sure
let's
they're
face
not.
it, is unlikely, they'll probably be really great.
And they won't be asking those questions on the day they take the money out.
That's true. That is true. That is true. Claire, we always ask at the end of the show, £1,000 move. If you had an unexpected £1,000, what would you do with it?
Okay, fun answer and boring answer?
What would you do with it? Yeah.
Okay, fun answer. I just spent £700 doing up my garden and buying a raised bed that I'm going to grow vegetables in. Now, I appreciate this will be uneconomic for year one.
Right.
But by the time we get around to year 5...
The good life, Claire, the good life.
Perhaps, but it brings me a lot of joy in stressful times to be growing little plants. Boring answer, £1,000 is roughly the size of quote I've had to re-insulate my loft.
Right.
So there is some insulation up there at the moment, but it's quite old and it's lost its puffiness. Can I say that?
Yeah.
We understand what you mean.
Yes, exactly. It's lost its insulating ability to keep my heating bills down. And with everything that's happening in the world and the way that energy bills are likely to go, your return on investment for energy proofing less efficient parts of your house is only going to go up. Are you making a note to get a quote for loft insulation?
We've never had loft insulation as an answer,
No,
Claire.
it's the first time. Yeah.
Well, that's why I said I'll do a boring and a fun, because I don't want people thinking that I'm boring. But equally, getting an energy bill in December that's
it's not going to be fun.
Yeah.
£50 less than it otherwise would have been, that will be more fun.
Absolutely right. Rick reflects.
Why fees automate spread? So when it comes to investing for your kids, why are you doing it? What's the purpose for your children? And for you, what do you want to get out of it? Where's it going to go? And when do they want to take that out? So have a think about why you want to be putting this money away. How much is it costing you by the provider? Try and keep those fees down as low as possible. Automate. try and keep those automations going every single month, no matter how much as your own finances change and evolve, if they have to move up or down, and spread. Where is that money actually going to be invested in? Spread it across a most dynamic and wide range of companies as possible. Because then if certain sectors go up or down and we have another war here or there, then you're not as exposed to big downfalls. And keep it in for as long as you possibly can.
Rick, thank you very much. Claire, an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Remind us where we can get a bit more of you.
Oh, well, you can follow me on social media. I'm at Claer B, or if you get the FT Weekend newspaper at the weekend, I do a column every Saturday, and I also share the first 300 clicks for free on my Instagram. Ooh. So if you want to try it out for free, get up early on Saturday morning and look at my stories.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Rick. And thank you for joining us. If you want to get in touch with us, you can find us on social or email us. Remember to hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And make sure to tell your friends who don't know their jices from their lices about us too. Before you go, though, just a quick reminder that everything you've heard on this podcast is for information and education only. It's not personal financial advice. Investing involves risk. And if you're unsure, it's best to speak to a regulated financial advisor. If you enjoy Investing Unlocked, especially our retirement episode, then I think you'll enjoy this from our sponsor, Pension B, the Pension Confident podcast, hosted by Philippa Lamb alongside a panel of financial experts. It's aimed at those who want to understand pensions and personal finance in a bit more depth, but without the jargon. They cover topics like ISAs, mortgages, the bank of mum and dad, as well as how to become a pension millionaire and the cost of divorce. There are new episodes every month, plus bonus content in between. You can listen on all major podcast platforms, in the Pension Bee app, or watch on YouTube. Just remember, anything discussed isn't financial advice, and when investing, your capital is at risk. Search the Pension Confident podcast wherever you listen.